Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few items. A reminder to please place your phone on mute until I invite you to speak or to ask your question. And please do not place your call on hold. Available for questions from the media, we have, disponible pour répondre aux questions des médias, nous accueillerons Mayor le maire Jim Watson. Phoning in au téléphone, Councillor Keith Egli, Chair, Ottawa Board of Health, conseiller municipal et président du Conseil de santé d'Ottawa. Steve Kanellakos, City Manager, Directeur municipal. La docteure Vera Etches, Chief Medical Officer of Health, médecin-chef en santé publique. Anthony DiMonte, General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services, Directeur général des services de protection et d'urgence. Phoning in au téléphone, we have Donna Gray, General Manager, Community and Social Services Department, Directrice générale des services sociaux et communautaires. Phoning in au téléphone, John Manconi, General Manager of Transportation Services, Directeur général des transports. Phoning in au téléphone, Dan Chenier, General Manager, Recreation, Cultural and Facility Services, Directeur général des loisirs, de la culture et des installations. Phoning in au téléphone, Wendy Stevenson, Chief Medical Officer, Chef des finances. Phoning in au téléphone, Michael Morgan, Director, Rail Construction Program, Directeur du programme de construction du train léger. I will now invite each agency alphabetically to ask their question. You may ask one question with one follow-up. Par ordre alphabétique, j'invite maintenant chaque organisme à poser une question et une question de suivi. We will now start with Jason White at 1310 News.
Hi there. My question is regarding the LRT update we received at City Council. I'm wondering if Mr. Morgan and Mr. Manconi, I think you two might be the best suited to answer this. I'm wondering how confident you are that Rideau Transit Group is taking full advantage of the COVID-19 declines we've seen in passenger volume in order to improve reliability. Are you confident that they're taking full advantage of this unique situation we're in right now in order to get the Confederation line where it needs to be in terms of reliability?
So it's John here. So COVID for them is a bit of a double-edged sword. I can tell you that they have taken advantage of our offers to reduce the fleet requirements and still maintain social distancing for our customers. And also the shutdowns that we've offered. However, their operation, which I remind everyone have parts, resources, and people from around the world, are not immune to COVID. So in fairness to them, they are also affected with their supply chain and things like that. But they have taken advantage of the reduced fleet size, the shutdowns, and I would say they are taking the matter seriously because they are losing a lot of money on the operation.
And Mr. Morgan, did you have a comment as well, or no?
No, I think John covered it. I think that I would just echo his comments that supply chain issues are real for them. They are working actively on the line. They took advantage of the shutdowns. They mobilized extra crews to get out there and work on the catenary systems. And so I think certainly during the shutdown period, they've been taking advantage of the time. And we still have to kind of see the outcomes in a few weeks' time.
Okay. My follow-up question is, I'm wondering, what is your sense of the reason for why that RTG thinks it'll take until the end of this year to improve reliability? And I know you said about pushing back and trying to get them to commit to the end of August. But why the length of time? Is it just the sheer volume and complexity of things that are wrong with this line and that need to be fixed, or is it that perhaps they're not devoting as many resources to this as they could or as we would like them to? I'm just wondering what your sense of the situation is for why such a long period of time when you push back and they finally do commit to some sort of timeline.
I'll let Michael answer that. It's technical in nature. Michael.
So a number of the items that they are repairing have a long lead time, and so one of the items, for example, is inductors. They're replacing those. Those are manufactured at a certain pace, and so they can only replace them at a certain pace. And so there's a few things that are like that are essentially the long poles in the tent in terms of the overall schedule. That's why they've kind of drawn it out that way. They've essentially cataloged each of the technical issues, the technical fixes, and put dates and timelines against those individual items. Our issue really with that approach is that they haven't told us when all of those little fixes will culminate in an overall service improvement. So they've identified a series of fixes, but they haven't said, we need these 10 fixes to be in effect, and they will be in effect as of this date, and as of that date, you will have improved service. So they haven't declared that date, and so that's really our pushback on them to say, you've given us a schedule with items that kind of go out to the end of the year. You haven't told us exactly when we're going to get improved service, so we're pushing back, and we're saying it needs to be by the end of the summer.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce qu'on a 104.7 Outaouais?
107.7 Outaouais. Are you on the line? No? Okay.
BC, Ottawa, Joanne Chianello.
Hello, folks. I was wondering if the city has figured out if we are going to have to pay RTG anything. I think you were looking at maybe December. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but has there been any payments to RTG or any decisions on whether we need to pay them for any maintenance?
So there has not been any additional payments to them.
When you say additional, do you mean any? I just want to make sure, the total payments.
There's none on the operating side, no. And they have disputed our interpretation of the holdbacks of all those payments that we've talked about over and over again. And we're going through the dispute process, looking at it line by line where they believe we're misinterpreting things. That process is not done yet. And they've also submitted an invoice for December's operation, which did run well in December. You might recall that. And so we have to look at that in terms of all the holdbacks and whether or not that nets out to any payment to them. So Mr. Morgan and a technical team and an audit team are going through those processes with them to see if there's any disputes. That they're right and we're wrong, and then if there is a payment, we will advise council.
Okay, thanks. And a little bit more on RTG and the rail line, maybe from both Mr. Manconi and Mr. Watson. What discussions have you folks had with the companies, and where do you think the problems lie? Because, that was a very big presentation today. I'll go through it more carefully later for sure. But just sort of, where are you feeling like the problems are being solved, and where maybe aren't they solved? And I wanted to also check to make sure that I thought that I heard that, Mayor, you talked to the CEO of Alstom, but I wasn't sure. So a little bit sort of on your back and forth with everyone, and where you're feeling confident and where you're feeling less confident in the fixes.
Yeah, maybe I'll begin, and John can answer the first part of the question. I've had a number of discussions with the president and CEO of Alstom. He's in Paris. The last one, I think, was a month or so ago, to put the case forward that we're not satisfied with the product that he has delivered. And he's been very receptive. We see some progress after those phone calls, so it seems to have some impact. But I think probably the weakest part of the system right now in terms of the largest number of problems, as John pointed out in today's council meeting, are the trains themselves. I did have a virtual meeting with the presidents and CEOs of the consortium that makes up RTG, and laid out my concern that they have to use this opportunity that COVID-19 has given us, where our ridership is plummeted, to make the fundamental fixes to the system once and for all, because I don't think anyone, myself, council, staff, and most importantly our employees and customers, want to go through another fall like we went through this past fall with unreliable service. So one of the points that I raised specifically was that it was not acceptable from our perspective to have them set a deadline of getting all of these problems fixed by the end of December of this year. We said it needs to be done by the end of August, because that's when school is back, and we'll be back to somewhat of a new normal in our transit numbers in September, hopefully, depending on COVID-19 and where it takes us. But to put off until December really is not acceptable to us as a customer. has to be done by the end of summer. And as John said, we've been very reasonable. We're willing to shut the system down as we did this week to allow full access for the trains and for testing and so on. And we want them to be reasonable that the end of August we think is a much more appropriate time to get the fundamental problems fixed once and for all. John?
Would just echo all that, and as I said during the council meeting, everything is fixable. That's the positive side of things. They have to bring the best of the best and the horsepower to the table to fix those issues and fix the vehicles.
Thank you very much. Moving on, we will go to Josh Pringle at CTV Ottawa.
Thank you very much. My first question is, during the presentation today, Mr. Kanellakos was talking about possible permits to allow restaurants and bars to expand patios. I was just wondering what idea the city was looking at for restaurants and bars to expand their patios, and any idea when that could actually happen.
Thank you, Josh. Right now, we're just exploring a number of ideas to help businesses in any way we can. On the patios, some of the ideas we've been throwing around, and it's not, obviously, we'd come back to council, and we haven't had this discussion with the mayor yet, is that, if physical distancing is going to be an issue and we need to spread people out, particularly in restaurants, and we don't want the scenes we've been seeing around the world when they've allowed people to gather and people have just been cramming into restaurants, we're thinking about in areas where we can allowing patios to expand beyond what their normal allowances are, so that people can physically distance outside and restaurants can take advantage of more clientele rather than trying to get them all inside, especially during the nice weather. So that's one of the ideas we're tossing around in terms of what would that mean, what does that mean for right-of-ways, and in terms of a timeline, we are working now towards the end of the month to try and finalize some of the plans in terms of how do we support the economic recovery.
And my follow-up question is, you were talking today about summer camps, beaches. Is there like a deadline that these decisions have to be made that they can open, that you can make sure that your staff are trained, lifeguards are trained, and all that for the summer? Is there like a date in mind to make sure that everything is in place so you can run these things if you're allowed to?
Yeah, we've been in contact with Parks and Rec departments with cities across the country, and we're all kind of of the same mindset. If we don't have clear direction really by early June, it'll be very hard to maintain a program over the summer because, as you said, we have staff ready to come online, but to make all the changes we need to make to ensure that there's physical distance or whatever guidelines were provided by the province and from Dr. Etches, we need time to ramp up our programming, to ramp up the physical space, to get in touch with the parents and the other participants who want to get into the programs. So we could get pushed back into the first week of July in terms of starting anything. It seems to be kind of the best case scenario right now. But again, that's fluid. Dan Chenier and his team are working through what's possible in our facilities, including pools, including gymnasiums, including all the summer camps that we have. So I would say, to summarize, in the next 2 weeks, we'll have a much better sense, and we probably have to make a decision within the next, just after the next 2 weeks, to get something going for late June, early July.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Julien Paquette, Le Droit.
Julien Paquette, Le Droit. I don't know who would be the best person to answer this question, but it concerns the situation with RTG. Now, a notice was sent at the start of March, but you don't seem to be satisfied with the answer that's being given in terms of the timescale, right? What do you think it'll take before you actually put your threat into action? If they're unable to provide a proper timescale, to improve the system by the end of August, what will happen if they can't do that? Well, we do have things available, tools available to us through the contract with RTG, but our priority right now is to work with RTG to see whether the work can be completed by August. If the answer is unacceptable to the city, we'll have to look at other solutions that the contract offers to us. But I can reassure you that we have brought a lot of pressure to bear on RTG. RTG is in a default situation, so it's a very strong position for the city. Thank you very much. Do you have a follow-up question, Julien? Yes, I do. On a different topic this time. We've seen an assessment of the estimated losses caused by COVID-19 for the city. Is this financial pressure getting worse? And will you have to take action to perhaps to resolve the situation or to improve the situation? I'll start. Well, it's always a challenge for us. It's always a major concern. We're talking about $1 million in lost revenue per day. There aren't many passengers using public transit, for example. Ridership's down. The number of people using rec centres is down also. In June, our Treasury will be tabling a report, a detailed report on our financial position. We've provided a summary of the challenges already. For example, there are 4,200 people who are basically summer workers who work for the city. People who are hockey or skating coaches, for example, and some people who work on a part-time basis in rec centres. They've all been cut. Now, we're still looking for other costs that we can freeze or savings we can make. That's why today I tabled a motion to Council to ask the two other levels of government to provide money, to provide assistance to municipalities through a subsidy, because we're not able to actually do everything we're doing to fight COVID-19 without the support of the province and the federal government. Mr. Forward has said that he will help us. He said that today, apparently. And I've talked to Ms. McKenna from the federal government about this as well. And I attempted to get her support for my idea. We're continuing the dialogue with ministers in both levels of government, because really we're not in a position to provide all the services we normally provide, plus the fight against COVID-19 with our own budget. It's not possible. Thank you very much.
Taylor Blue.
Hi. So my first question is actually about the new testing guidelines put out this morning, suggesting that anybody in Ottawa or any resident experiencing COVID-19 symptoms seek testing at one of the three locations where that's possible. I'm wondering, I guess, what's the maximum number of people that could be processed between the two care clinics and the assessment centre on a daily basis when it comes to testing? And I know this just came out this morning, but have you seen any kind of jump in people showing up at these locations in the last couple of hours?
Thank you. The assessment center, when it first opened, was estimating that it could see and assess 400 people per day. Then, it calibrated to the demand, and, I think the hours were shifted, but the infrastructure is there to see up to 400 people a day if needed. The other two sites, I believe their infrastructure and the staffing levels allow under 100 people per day. But all of this, is going to be open to assessment in terms of what is needed into the future. We know many family care clinics have actually stayed open, and I don't think that's widely known, that many family physicians in Ottawa are assessing people by phone, virtually, and still seeing people in their offices. So my advice would be also to call your family physician to find out if they are doing testing. That may be possible. And we're looking to evolve the testing system into the future. We also have a mobile assessment service, which is, there for people who may not be able to make it to an assessment center. And, I think these are the kinds of things we need to continue as we look into the future, where we're going to be trying to find, all of the cases we can in our community, arrive on site for workplace outbreaks. This is an approach that will evolve. So in terms of the burden, anticipated, we looked at what happened when last week we opened up testing to everyone over 60 years of age, and we found that there wasn't a large increase. We did see some increase in the population over 60 presenting at the Brewer Assessment Center, but it was manageable. And so again, an estimate of the people who might present across the whole population was taken from the self-assessment tool use for people in Ottawa using the provincial self-assessment tool online. Again, it was under a few hundred people who use the self-assessment tool and have been told, well, stay home, self-isolate, who may well have symptoms that could be an indication that it's worthwhile finding out if it's COVID. And so we think those numbers are manageable.
Thanks so much. And my other question is about the province taking on that new authority today to make changes to the management of long-term care homes who are struggling to deal with outbreaks of COVID-19. I'm wondering, is this something that is on the table being considered for any long-term care homes in Ottawa? Obviously, we know we have a handful that are really challenged with the number of people that have died and been infected.
The approach to supporting long-term care homes in Ottawa has been a collaboration of a number of organizations across the healthcare sector, with the hospitals taking the lead in supporting around staffing and making sure people understand how to use personal protective equipment, that the infection prevention practices that need to be in place are in place. So the homes with the greatest challenge have been paired up with hospitals, and my understanding is that this is changing the situation, that practices are improving, that the home owners, the management of the homes have been cooperative and working together alongside the hospitals. Obviously the hospitals, have other work to do as well that will be starting up, and the responsibility to run the homes is the home ownership, and so the work is to make sure that they continue to have that capacity and ability to carry out that responsibility. And so to my knowledge, there is no conversation about replacing management in any of the homes. We have seen an improvement in that we used to have 9 and then 6 long-term care homes coded as red in terms of the level of support needed, and now that is down to 4. We've also seen progress in the number of cases of COVID infection in the homes in the worst situation have dropped. So I think we're making progress as a system, and we'd like to see that continue.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. We will move on to Sue Sharing on the city from the Burbs.
Thanks very much. Mayor Watson, today one of the councillors referred was Teresa Cavanaugh, who suggested that when you brought your own motion forward vis-a-vis the sidewalk space, that you had created a turf war. I'm wondering if there wasn't a more cooperative way of dealing with this, perhaps talking to Councillor Menard and Councillor McKenney beforehand. It did appear, certainly to myself and to many people on social media, as a bit of a turf war.
Well, there's no question that there was great opposition by the business community, and that only came out in the last day or two when we started to receive a pile of emails and letters from about 31 different businesses. And it was clear that they were not listened to. In many instances, the people indicated that they had not even been, weren't even aware that this was a proposal. So obviously there was a breakdown in communications between the councillor's office and those businesses. And I felt as mayor it was my responsibility to bring forward what I thought was a reasonable compromise. And I think Councillor Brockington made it more reasonable by making it 2/3 instead of unanimous, and get some buy-in by these businesses, because these businesses, as I said, are clinging by their fingernails to just survive. You know, they've lost everything, they have no income coming, and to go and do something that would adversely impact them as they felt it would was not the right thing to do. So I appreciate the support of council to move forward on a proposal that will allow councillors to do a broader consultation. And, you know, I think Councillor Leeper has shown good judgment. He's got the support of his BIA, I think, in Wellington West and with the merchants that he told us about today. And he actually set, I think, the gold standard for setting up a road closure on Byron because it was not a busy street. He chose not to do Richmond Road. He chose to do Byron, which is parallel and just a block away. And I go by that fairly often because I live just not too far from that area, and I find that the use is very good, and he handled it well. This was a case where it was clearly not handled well, and obviously the reaction from the business community was pretty swift. Thank you.
Just another question for Mayor Watson, and I appreciate that you may not have actually heard. It came up over the last 2 days at the joint committee meeting, which I don't believe you might have been listening in, I have no idea, but there was a delegate, I guess he's a former city staffer, and he was asked by one of the councillors where he used to work. He declined to answer, and then both Jan Harder and Eli El-Shantiri laughed at him, and Councillor El-Shantiri called him a loser. I'm just wondering if this is an acceptable in your mind of treating a delegate.
Yeah, I unfortunately didn't hear that exchange. I was trying to listen to part of the Planning and Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee throughout the day, but I'm not familiar with that, so I really can't comment on something I didn't hear or see.
Is it something that you'll look into, though?
Well, again, it's not the mayor's role to discipline members of council. We're all independent here, and you know, they have to speak for themselves. I can only speak for myself, and as I said, I'm not familiar with what the exchange between the councillors and this individual. I don't know who this person is.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to John Willing at the Ottawa Citizen.
It's a question for John Manconi. Hey, John, I'm wondering if you foresee a scenario where OC Transport customers would be required to wear a mask to use the transit service.
So, John, we're bringing our plan to Transit Commission June 1st. We have a very good plan that is based on a lot of science and a lot of research, and Dr. Etches and I and Tony DeMonte are meeting tomorrow to do some final sign-offs. And once we have all those things done, we'll be able to bring forward that plan, and those details are important. As you've heard Dr. Etches say, wearing a mask when you can't do social distancing is an important protection for everyone. So it's certainly something we're considering, and we'll be bringing those details forward.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, John?
Yeah, thanks, Kina. On a different topic, I think it's a question for either Steve Kanalakis or Dan Chenier. I'm wondering if the city is going to be bullish to rebook the sports fields when the province allows the sports fields to be used. And I'm wondering if the city has done any research as to what the rental market is for the field by organizations like ball teams, soccer teams, that kind of thing, when there would be essentially half seasons or less.
Yeah, as I said in an earlier asked question, we're still a couple weeks away from figuring that out. It will all depend on what the guidance is from the province in terms of social distancing as they start moving into stage 2 and ultimately stage 3, which I'm not sure when that's going to come. So activities on fields and how many people can gather and organize sports and whether there's adjustments. I don't think organized leagues are any different from pro teams and how we're going to approach that ultimately. And Dr. Etches is going to be involved in that decision-making with her guidance, but we're waiting to see what the province is going to say. We're working out what those things might look like, just to be ready, because we want to be nimble and ready to go. We don't want to get caught flat-footed here. But we're a couple weeks away before we finalize that. Dan is heading up that task team. I picked him deliberately to lead that team because many of the services that are coming back online that have been closed are basically under his responsibility. So he's best positioned to do that, and people will be notified very soon in terms of where we sit in relation to what the province says.
Thank you, Kina.
Thank you very much. Le dernier, mais pas le moindre, Gilles Taillon, Radio-Canada.
Gilles Taillon, Radio-Canada. Is that me? Yes, it's my turn? Yes? Okay, great, fantastic, thank you. I think you've already answered Mr. Morgan and Mr. Marconi several times in English, but I'd like to get the French version of your answer about what RTG is proposing to do to remediate the issues. Well, Gilles, RTG has given a schedule of fixes. We're happy with the details, but we're not happy with the fact that they didn't give a deadline by which the system will be functioning at an appropriate level, a satisfactory level, if you like. They have said that the work will be done by the end of the year. That's not acceptable to the city. So we've explained to RTG that we expect the system to be working properly by the end of August. And we've asked them to bring pressure to bear on Alstom to deal with the issues facing the Alstom vehicles. Thank you very much. My follow-up question is for Mayor Watson. Is on the economic position of the city. You've said that we're actually making huge losses every day. You know, you've asked for assistance from the various levels of government, but that might be some time in coming. How long will it take the city to actually get over the impact of COVID-19? Well, our Treasury will be, or our Finance Department rather, will be giving us more detail next month on our fiscal position. We know that we can deal with the situation, if you like, for the time being. But if COVID-19 were to continue 3, 4, even 6 months, well, we won't be able to dip into our reserve fund for this type of thing. So it's important for me to kick off a dialogue with the other levels of government because they have more capacity. They're in a better position to provide assistance for various segments of society, farmers, seniors, for example. These are the right decisions that they've made. Now, I think it's important also to point out that municipalities provide the the greatest number of services, so police services, fire, ambulance services, and health services as well. And we've seen costs evolve over the past 9 weeks. So we're not facing a crisis, not yet. But if things were to continue for the next 5 or 6 months, well, at that point, that would be a real challenge for us, not only for us here in Ottawa, but for all municipalities across Ontario and across the country even. That's fine. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much.
This is all the time that we have today. C'est tout le temps que nous disposons aujourd'hui. Bonne journée. Thank you.